Happy Sunday afternoon, everybody. It's our Overtime Sunday Q&A live, and today we're going to tackle a couple questions or topics dealing with how do we handle it when the church culture goes toxic, how do we heal from that, and what do we do to prevent it in the future. The idea of this Sunday afternoon live is that Christians around the world get their content in lots of different ways. Many of us get content, teaching, worship, all that live on Sundays or Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, different times throughout the week. And that's really great. And my life has been absolutely transformed by those experiences. And many of you would say the same thing. But I also know this, is that while we need teaching and preaching, and we need all those forms of content, more of a discussion-based model is also really helpful when it comes to diving into some of these harder questions. And today, we're going to talk about one that is really near to my heart, and I think near to a lot of people's heart, probably in our community, in Hartsville, South Carolina. And so no matter where you might be watching this, I bet there's some similarities. I'll tell you why it's a big deal here. When we first started our church, we thought, okay, we're going to study all the people that are unchurched, that don't do church, and so we started talking to people and asking questions. And what we found was this: is that what seemed to be the case is not so much that they were a bunch of unchurched people in our area. It was more like there were many de-churched people in our area, and folks that have had experiences with church. Now, that's not true everywhere, but we're in the deep South. And so, excuse me, it's allergy season. People have been hurt by church. There have been, different kinds of bad experiences. And so I think we need to talk about that so that we can move past that as a community. And maybe for you, if you're watching today and you're not part of a church family right now, and you have a good reason for not being part of a church family, is that you've seen the bad side of this. Then I hope today's really encouraging. If you're part of a church family, and maybe don't know it because nobody ever does this on purpose, sort of unintentionally you're contributing to the hurt that can come out of church families that get toxic sometimes. Man, I hope today that you take something away from this that can change. And if you're in a position where you're part of a church family that's just very healthy and you feel healthy in that, nobody's perfect, no church is perfect, then I hope that today sort of serves like some guardrails to keep us from going there. Let me jump in. Today's topic was going through the book of Joshua, Joshua chapter 22, where there's big conflict, and it appeared that a couple tribes went rogue and they were making their own altar, and the rest of the tribes of Israel came and basically confronted them with that. And it says they were about to go to war. And the moral of the story is, because they confronted them with some honest and difficult questions, and the people that were the recipients of those questions took that well and responded to it well. Actually, what could have turned into a disaster turned into something really beautiful, and that there was a monument built to unity that they all had in this family, this chosen people of God movement. And so here's one other hope before we dive into this. I want to be really careful today because I'm a huge fan of our local churches. There's so many churches I just love, so many people, and I'm saying this as somebody who's been a part of connected to a lot of local churches now in our area and around for years and years and years, with my father being a pastor, and really all of his friends and connections at other churches. I just feel like I've been in touch with a lot of this over the years. The goal is this is not a put down of the church. This is like, let's get healthy, and let's correct our mistakes of the past, or maybe correct our mistakes of the present, and let's build a better future with less hurt people. And so anyway, that's the goal. We'll see where it goes. Okay, I'll read this in Romans chapter 12. I'll paraphrase it, verse 18. You can look it up. Paul's writing to the Romans, obviously early Christians, and he says this. He says, as far as it depends on you, as much as you have control over anything, it's your responsibility to live at peace with everyone. And then at the beginning of verse 19, he says, don't take revenge. So we're going to dive in on that. We have 3 questions that we're going to start with, and actually I want to put this up so you can see it. If you have a question that you want, or a comment, or a direction you want us to go, you can text I ask to 97,000, and we will add that in, and we'll talk about that. And whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or somewhere else, if you're watching somewhere else, you're pretty sneaky, because I don't even know where that is myself. But anyway, and it's on the topic. It doesn't have to be on this topic, but on the topic of the health of the church and church family and all that, and how we can stay healthy, get healthy, do better. You can text those questions in. Again, last time I asked to 97,000. Okay, I got a few stages of this I want to talk through and see if this makes sense to you as we're going through it. The first, church families are just families. They're just people, right? And when Jesus launched this new creation on really Good Friday into Easter Sunday, a family was actually born out of that. It's the worldwide church. And the way the worldwide church is, it's organized into local churches. And so there's many, many local churches. And that's God really didn't prescribe exactly how we're supposed to do all this. He left us a lot of discretion in how to do church families. But regardless, whether it's a big church family or a very small church family, churches are families, and they're people. And they're people that bring baggage into those families. And the problem, though, is whenever a church family goes toxic, when a church family goes toxic, just so we know, it does poison the reputation of that church. It doesn't mean there's no coming back from it. When a church family has a lot of infighting, when there's a lot of jealousies, when there's a lot of rivalries, and when there's drama, when there's big blow-ups, fights, when there's groups that are pitted against each other, whenever there's just an unhealthy culture, that's not something that's kept secret. And it gets out, and it affects the reputation of the church, the individual local church. And that's bad, so one church, I never want that to happen for us. I never want people to say, well, one church, they can't stand the pastor. The pastor can't stand the people. They had this big blow up and this big argument over this, and the churches, there's 2 different groups and they're going to war. You never want that. It's terrible for the reputation of the local church. But even bigger than that, it's actually terrible for the reputation of the church, the Jesus family around the world. And in turn, it turns people away from the greatest hope the world has ever seen, which is the good news of Jesus. And so we've got a lot of responsibility to keep our church cultures healthy, because if we don't, it damages our local church. But that's not the most important thing. In addition to that, it damages the reputation of the worldwide family of Jesus, and that's a disaster. But not even that is the most important thing. It actually impedes people from experiencing the hope that's found in the good news of Jesus. And so here's what I found whenever we surveyed people when we were getting ready to start this church. There were very, very, very few people that were initially against Jesus, that were unchurched and, for all intents and purposes, not living as a Christian. Very few against Jesus. They were all against the church. And you say, well, those heathens, let me let you in on a secret. They had good reasons for being against the church because they had experienced the bad side of church. Okay, so I'm going to give you some stages. Again, if you got those questions, I'm checking out. I've got 3 good ones to launch in on, and we'll plan on doing those unless there's something that just jumps out at you. So how does it get there? How do we get to the place where churches are toxic? Usually it starts with unresolved conflict between people. Now, it depends on what your church tradition is. That might come from a business meeting that sometimes happens way too often. And there's conflict there, and somebody's feelings get hurt. And the conflict, conflict's not bad. In fact, I love healthy back and forth conflict. Great ideas come out of that. But people feel like they're being attacked. Maybe somebody is attacking somebody else. Whatever. There's conflict of some kind. Somebody says something. somebody does something, maybe a hard decision has to be made. Sometimes in church, in families, church families too, hard decisions have to be made. And it's unavoidable. So a hard decision gets made, and there's hurt feelings. They're never expressed, never put on the table, and there's unresolved conflict. Okay, again, it could be anything from carpet color to maybe it's a kid who's just is making it difficult for the other kids to hear about Jesus in kids' church, and then you got to figure out how to navigate it. And somebody's feelings get hurt, and it's not expressed, and it's not resolved. It's not, nobody's pulled to the side and say, hey, can you help me understand this? And responds really with grace in that situation. It's just because why? Because I'll tell you one of the reasons that I think conflict goes unresolved in the church is because I think sometimes we teach people that to be Christians means that we're called to be nice. We are not called to be nice. We're called to be good. Good is better than nice. Nice means avoid conflict. Good means be kind. Good means that you're more afraid of unresolved conflict than you are immediate conflict. And conflict doesn't have to be aggressive, okay? But so unresolved conflict. Unresolved conflict leads to rivalries. It's just people don't like each other, and it's so crazy. You can be in the same family and not like each other. There are churches now, and this is not a knock on churches, because the reason for this is churches are made up of people. This is what happens at businesses. This is what happens in any group of people that get together, that do life together, and are pursuing something where they got to make decisions, and tough decisions have to be made. And, you all can't spend equal time with each other, and so rivalries come up. And here's the worst one. Here's the word that's the killer when this happens in churches. And just want to encourage you to think about this if you care about the health of the church. People make alliances. So it's I think the carpet should be green, and they think it should be red. Okay, and so what I do is I go get Carl and I get Cynthia. I'm like, y'all think the carpet should be green, don't you? Don't you think the carpet should be green? And then they sort of nod along because they're polite. I'm like, well, we think the carpet should be green, but they think the carpet should be red. And it's like we're playing our own episode of Survivor in the church, making alliances so that we can get our way, beat our rival, or get payback. Get payback in the church. Get payback. Absolutely, there's people in the church that want to get payback. Shouldn't be, but want to get payback. It's revenge, right? That revenge belongs to the Lord. In fact, that's how Romans chapter 12, verse 19 finishes. It says, don't take revenge. Revenge belongs to the Lord. And so we try to get payback, and we make alliances. And then after alliances, that's usually in the pattern of church drama and church toxic culture. That's when the disaster begins to unfold, and the hurt happens. And so, having spent a lot of time with pastors and leaders that have gone through that, and let me just another note that you may find interesting. And this is something actually I think every Christian, everybody that's in church needs to know. Did you know that some of the most hurt people in our community at any given time, and I can speak from experience over the last 25 years, some of the most hurt and wounded people in any community, in our community over the last 25 years at least, are pastors. Deeply, deeply wounded. Pastors and their spouses and their children. Just really hurt. And it shouldn't be that way. The church should not be the place that's defined by poison that gets in our culture and rivalries that happen. So, because, and to give you a reminder, go back to Romans 12, Paul says, as far as it depends on you, here's our responsibility. As far as it depends on us. Now, sometimes things are out of your control, but as much as it's in your control, it's our job to live at peace everyone. And there's other places in the scriptures that get around to this side of it, especially those that belong to the household of faith. And so what happens? Your church is damaged. The mission of a church is damaged whenever the people of a church are not good at conflict and let it fester and become rivalries and alliances. Whenever people want to get their way more than they want to accomplish the mission, when people want to get their way more than they want to live at peace, that's a great question. Like, do you want to get your way more or do you want to live at peace? Well, people in church will say, well, I want to live at peace, but I want the but's the killer, right? And that means, actually, no, I want to say I want to live at peace, but in practicality, the way I act is I want my way. And so when all that happens, it hurts the reputation of the church. It hurts the reputation of the worldwide church. And the greatest thing that really makes me so mad is it hurts Christians. I think about those pastors that I've just seen so wounded over the years. Those church leaders that I've seen so wounded. That really makes me mad. And part of it was their fault, I'm sure. Part of it was their fault. But it really upsets me that the church is a place where people get hurt more than anything else. I mean, it just makes me so mad. We can be better. We should be better than that. We should be determined to be better than that, man. Church, I'm speaking to myself, okay? This is, how does a church stay healthy? A church stays healthy by constantly talking through and thinking through things like this. By constantly raising our awareness that this can happen to us. And so, like, man, we got to keep it at the forefront. And if you're part of One Church family, man, we're so blessed to have the culture that we have. We're so blessed. Certainly not anything that has come from the leadership. It is a gift from God. I mean that genuinely. But, so how do we keep a healthy culture? Well, I think stay in scripture, stay in prayer, all that, yes. But we got to keep thinking about these things and keep talking about these things and keep learning from the past, learning from our past and learning from other people's past and learning from scripture so that we don't repeat those mistakes. And then, because if a church becomes toxic, not only does the reputation and mission suffer, not only do its people get hurt and suffer, but people that don't know Jesus will miss their opportunity to connect with the gospel in the context of a church because of a toxic church culture. We've got to do better. We've got to keep doing better if we're doing better. We've got to stay on it. We've got to be aware. We've got to be aware. No little old mean lady in a church, to be stereotypical. No little old mean lady in a church, and there are those, or little old mean, and there's little like young men in church, young men in church. There's all kind of people, but just take a stereotypical. Imagine a church where there's this little lady that's like, she owns her pew and she's really mean to everybody. You know, she didn't start the whole thing out intending to be a mean old lady in the church that drove everybody out. Nobody, you know, and so nobody intends to do that. We got to stay on our guard. Question or thought two. Philip, what's up? Holly, what's going on? Sorry, I've been meaning to, my computer's been really slow, so I apologize for not saying hello. Question number two. How do you heal when you've been really hurt in a church experience? One is to start with a recognition that it doesn't have to be that way. And it's not that way everywhere. That doesn't mean you're just going to instantly heal, but just to realize that what you experienced, I hope, is abnormal. If you've been hurt in church, okay, I'll just tell you a few like generic church hurt stories that I hear. And this is not specific to anyone, because I've heard so many that I can just put them together and sort of group them. There's so many people that have been hurt because a church family views a staff member as their spiritual servant. And when they don't meet their needs every time they ring their spiritual little bell in the way they want to fire them because they paid them to do the ministry. And basically what happens is, it's like they get out pitchforks and they it's like a mob to run people out. And, and then on the other side of that can happen to church leaders. On the other side of that, I've seen church leaders, and this is something every church leader should be just so aware of, that when it was probably time for them to go, they dug their heels in, and they said, "You can't make me go anywhere. You can't." And again, if the Lord tells you to stay somewhere, you stay. And so there's been like the leader that got the boot, and all the people on either side are held on and fought like crazy. Maybe in not a great way, sometimes in a great way. It's not always, but just for example. So that's one category of church hurt. Another one is through cliques in the church, that exclusive. You're not our kind of people. Now, to say this, anytime a church is over 30 people, not everybody can be equally friends with everybody else. So if you go somewhere and you expect everybody should be equally friends, well, then you need to be in a small group and not in what we call a church, because you got to have certain people that you're closer to. It's just impossible. But what I mean by cliques is that there's rival groups, or it's like picking a lunch table in middle school. Is that just exclude people intentionally. Again, it's not. There's no. You got to develop friendships. There are going to be people that are already friends. I can't jump in there and say, "Hey, I want to be equal friends with you, and y'all been best friends for 20 years, but I want to be in." That's great, but certain people are going to be closer. That's fine. But it's the idea that they look down. There's church cultures where they look down on other people, and you can't be part of our group. I've seen people really hurt by that. I've seen people really, really, really hurt by churches that call out sins that are convenient to call out in other people's lives, and they make a point of that person. So that is so much hurt. That is so much hurt. I've seen fights over decisions: green carpet, blue carpet, budget, where the money goes for missions, who's going to cut the grass, what are we going to do with this building, or whatever. And it just blows up. So how do you heal from those? I think it's okay to take a step back. You need Christian community. Maybe take a step back for just a little bit and just to look around and say, is there any place, how about this, that's a good place to heal? That's what you want to look for. Is there any place that seems like a good place to heal? How do you find that? And again, it could be a church, it could be a Bible study, it could be, I think that I'm a huge fan of the church, of local churches, but it couldn't be a Bible study. But here's one way to go. Do you know anybody that has been really church hurt, and has healed through that and is now in a healthy relationship in a church family? Well, if you do, then maybe that's a good place to go. Or you could ask that person about it. So take a step back. Realize that that's not the way it always is, not the way it should be. Take a step back and then look for a place to heal. And then number 3 or 4, whatever, like go slow. Go slow. Just be part of Christian community and give yourself time to heal, because everybody knows, this is true for other people. It takes time to heal. Oh, we've had people in our church that have been church hurt, and I've sort of been able to watch the healing process, and sometimes that takes a year just to get over that. And if you're part of a church family and you know somebody's been church hurt, I would encourage you to just be so patient with them. Let's say I get church hurt and I end up at your church or whatever church. I've just been through it, man. I've just been through it. It's been really hard. The first Sunday I show up, you probably shouldn't say, you need to sign up to volunteer today, right? And I'm all about signing up to volunteer today. My goodness, I love that, because they get you on the team. But somebody that's been church hurt needs to heal. Question 3. We'll check the inbox here. You can text I asked 97,000 if you got anything you want to put in there to add to this. Question number 3. Okay. Question number 3 is, how do we keep church hurt from happening again? personally, I can make a decision that I'm going to choose to, when I've got to prioritize living at peace or getting my way, I'm prioritizing living at peace. That's the idea, to prioritize that. Number two, to have the Christian maturity to realize that when you have disagreements or see things different ways, the other person, their motive is probably for the best. They probably want what's best for the church or for the ministry or for the carpet color. They probably want what's best. The reason they think neon green carpet would be the best is because they think neon green carpet would be the best. So realize this person's got a legitimate view. Probably in the right place. And then another way to avoid falling into this trap is, this is probably the hardest one. When your feelings are hurt, Christians, it's your responsibility to go talk with that person, because listen to this, as far as it is possible, your responsibility, one of your primary purposes is to live at peace with the household of faith. It's one of your core responsibilities. This is not like an extra. This is one of the core ones. Is it fun to go talk to people and say, listen, you hurt my feelings, or I don't understand why you told my child he had to go stand in the corner, or whatever, in the kids' lesson, or whatever the case may be. And so it's our job to have those conversations. In Joshua 22, we see them have that conversation. Very difficult, very tense. But what comes out of that is something better, because they were willing to be honest. And then above all else, be aware that the greatest thing that God is doing on planet Earth is the church. It's through the church. But because it's comprised of people, the mission of the church can be compromised by me and by you. It's like, and just make up our minds. I will not be part of pumping poison into the hope for the world. I won't, because the church is amazing. The church that belongs to Jesus, no matter the denomination, no matter the size, no matter the location, it's the bride of Christ. And I repent for playing those games that make for toxic church cultures. I ask the Lord to heal us, to deal gently with us, and to help me from here on out be the biggest cheerleader for peace and unity within the church. All right, last note, then we'll shut it down. I said we can make alliances. You can think in churches, you make alliances. You got the red carpet people and the green carpet people. And they're making their alliances. Local churches themselves can be alliances. You realize that, like, every church, we're like Sunday school classes. If you grew up in a church with Sunday school classes meet in different locations, right? But they're really part of the same body. Well, that's what's true for the church that belongs to Jesus. We meet in different locations, but we are part of the same church. And so we can let one church, or First XYZ church, or whatever church, we can let that become our tribe. And we're more concerned with the brand of one church than we are the church. And so when somebody leaves a church, well, they're done. I'm done with them. I'm done with them. And then what we're doing, this other church is, some people from our church went to that church. If it's the church that belongs to Jesus, who cares? Who, other than the fact that hopefully you love those people and you enjoy spending time with them, who cares? If that becomes a rivalry, then it's an alliance that we're creating that is contributing to a toxic church culture. It's not doing any good for your local church, and it is definitely not doing any good for the church, and it's definitely not doing any good for the reputation of Jesus and opportunities for people that don't know him to experience the hope that's found in Jesus that many times is experienced in the community we call churches. So I guess the takeaway is, let's make a commitment to be serious about unity in the church, even if it costs us our preferences, or even if it costs us a difficult conversation, or even if it costs us having to hear something from somebody else about us, maybe that we didn't want to hear. Because, Paul would say, as far as it depends on you, if it's up to you at all, whatever you have any control over, make sure, if possible, that you live at peace. And whatever you do, never take on the attitude of somebody seeking revenge. Because this is the church. If you're a Christian, it's the family of Jesus people that have been redeemed by what he did on the cross. And our entry into the family is simply because we believed in him. Not just about him, but in him. And if we've got that in common, we can figure the rest out as we go. Guys, hope you have a great Sunday. I hope everybody listening to this, whether live or later, can we join forces? Can we link arms in a commitment to make our church culture healthy and to never let the poison of rivalries, unresolved conflict, or allegiances, never let that poison into the family that God has created to paint a picture of who he is, the church. Guys, hope you have a great Sunday.